Hello and welcome to the Insights Overflow podcast, episode 4. In today's episode, I'm joined by Theunis, who's the CEO of MultiTel. MultiTel specializes in mobile device management and cloud solutions. All over the globe, businesses are struggling to manage the millions of mobile devices that they've deployed within their organizations. Having a quality MDM solves part of the problem. However, interpreting the data is the last mile that completes the picture. We discuss how to turn an enterprise mobile device from a liability into an asset that can drive productivity and increase sales. We unpack how the interpretation of data drives efficiency and compliance across the organization. Thank you for joining me, and I hope you enjoy this episode of the Insights Overflow podcast. Hello and welcome to the Insights Overflow podcast, the show where we talk to customers, partners, and industry leaders about the lessons that they've learned and the successes they have in order to make an impact. On episode 4, I'm joined today by Theunis, who's the CEO of MultiTel. Theunis, welcome.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so thanks for talking to me today. And I think there's a couple of things I want to cover. So, obviously there's a lot sort of within your company name that tells people what you do. But, before our paths crossed, there's a couple of things I didn't know about. I didn't know what MDM was. I didn't know how that whole space worked. So I want to sort of uncover for everybody to understand, what MDM is and sort of the what the value it adds for customers. But then I want to talk about something a little bit more sort of interesting or sort of the long-term aspects of sort of the idea of data as a product. And I know we'll sort of get to sort of what we're doing together and what that means. But those are the two sort of main things that I really want to cover and sort of want to get our listeners to understand today. So I think maybe in a couple of minutes, sort of describe what MultiTel does and particularly sort of what MDM is and what that actually means.
With pleasure. So MultiTel is a 23-year-old company. As the name suggests, multiple telephony type solutions. And we've got a range of services which really focus on mobility, really. That includes the communication part of things, the physical device, and then very importantly, the device management side of things. These days, it's important for most customers to purchase and use a managed device. A device which is unmanaged, which is given to an employee out in the field, is a risk more than an asset, purely because it can disappear, it can't be tracked. It can be abused, it can be stolen or lost. And without that recoverability or that manageability of that device, it's a risk, not an asset. So over the course of the last 20 years, we've moved from understanding these requirements as a customer really to being a provider of services around mobility. I think it's been important for us to know who the main players in the market is. We've been fortunate enough to partner with the right companies in the environment and collaborate with them. So we are, important to say, the official distributor for a product called SOTI, Mobi Control, which is widely regarded as the number one MDM in the world. And the reason for that is because of its variety of operating systems that it supports and its really broad array of features that is very attractive to customers. So that being said, no product is perfect, right? So how did we meet? It was around a specific customer and a specific customer requirement where specific data analytics or more detailed data analytics was required. The device, or rather the reporting component of our MDM, is not that feature rich. So we really needed something which was capable of doing more. And that's really where we started talking to OQLIS, and were then able to very seamlessly integrate your platform into our MDM environment. So we also run an MSP environment where we service a wide range of customers. We manage hundreds of thousands of devices at any particular point in time. And we are now able to give that detailed reporting to every user or every administrator of these devices, which is available on our platform.
Yeah, and I think, when you think about the physical device and even the person using the device, they using that device, and that device lives within an ecosystem of the solution. So think about when you sort of check into a sort of a closed community where the guard needs to check your license and all that. That's a sort of a device that needs updates, needs to be managed. The security needs to be managed. But more than that, that device can tell you more about what's happening on the ground through almost what you consider metadata. And I think, the interesting thing that we've done together, in particularly around sort of, you call it like check-in or sort of absenteeism, or like making sure the device is in the right place. Why that's important is if you think about managing either a team of salespeople or employees that need that device, you as management, you need to get the bird's eye view to see what's happening. And you need to put all those rules in place that tell you how many people have checked in today. Where are they? Are they in the geofence that you expect? And, you can start using that data for a proxy for attendance or registration and all those things. So, that device and managing that device, there's so much more because it exists in a suite of solutions. And that's one of the core things that the customer's trying to solve. Yes, the fact that they can update that device remotely or log in remotely is important, but you need to physically go into that device to try do that. And, what people want from a management point of view is to see that on a dashboard and have those rules in place that tell them, what's good and bad, and things like that.
Yeah, I think device management as a concept really allows the owner of a device to be in total control of that device. You've just mentioned a few things which spurs a specific topic that I think might be interesting to talk about. And that is, if you're able to manage a device while it's in the field, from a data usage perspective, from an application availability perspective, from managing abuse, tracking it, and all of those things, which MDM is typical for, that's great. And that generates a fantastic data stream into the server, right? Which is fantastic. But if that information can't be interpreted or disseminated in a way which is understandable for the person in the organization who really needs that intelligence, it's useless, right? Typically in an MDM environment, what happens is an IT administrator would be the one who would have visibility on those devices. And he would typically do things like check that the devices don't run out of battery, put rules in place to flag it when a device is low on battery, make sure that all the devices are compliant to the rules that have been set out for it. But we've realized, and together with you yourselves have realized, that you can use that data stream and make certain accurate assumptions based on the data that comes in. You mentioned an attendance register, something which we've deployed for a specific customer now. And how we do that basically is we say, listen, the MDM data stream contains the following: a location of a device. It tells whether that device has checked in or has been switched on. It tells us whether the application which the person is supposed to be using between 8 and 5 is actually in use, and a few other things. And we can then make an accurate deduction that that person is at work, and therefore he is present at work. If some of those or all of those are not present, we can make the logical assumption that he is absent, right? And that pure principle which we've applied to that data stream from the MDM has been invaluable for so many of our customers. There's a few other things, and it's important to say absenteeism or an attendance register is important for a certain person in an organization. In this case, the HR director, for example. He needs to know if people are at work or not. However, there's other information which we can get from that device and which is produced in the MDM data stream. For example, which phone calls have been made, to what number, at what time. I mean, an MDM allows you to really have all of that information. And for the financial director or financial person in an organization, it would be important to know if the device is being abused after hours. Is data being used at a time outside of working hours? And all of those sort of things is important to know, right? And the FD of a company would be interested in that information, for example. And we are now able to present each of those people who is MDM illiterate, if you like, right? It doesn't have access to the MDM system, to merely click on a link on his phone or on his computer and view the graphs and the statistics and the insights that pertains to his job and the information that he needs to know. The CEO of a company will have an overview of all of these things and more. And our clients really find that to be invaluable.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, we've, from a software point of view, we've long held this belief that if you just sort of present dashboards and information, that's great, but you're not sort of telling the full story. So part of what we've been thinking about, for the last couple of months and years is that data will become a product. And the way it becomes a product is that when you couple a data stream that's rich with information and sort of an industry leader that's got sort of insights about their industry and what their customers want, and sort of defines the benchmark of what people should be looking for. If you put those two things together, you can think about the fact that you can almost create applications specifically for that customer that just happen to be in the form of a dashboard or like a data experience. And I think that's one of the things that we've been focusing on is, can we build our platform that enables our partners and customers to be able to do that, to take the data that they have, the knowledge that they have, and put that together in a way that they can basically on-sell that to their customer as a product. And what that allows you to do is sort of monetize your industry insight and sort of have long-term sustainable revenue that customer will continue to receive value from that experience, and possibly even allow you to scale that insight, by hundreds and thousands of customers, that you don't necessarily need to sit down and consult and show them what to click, because that sort of dashboard or what we call data app sort of represents that experience or that distilled version of that insight. So I think that's the magic of this type of partnership, is that allows you to combine industry knowledge and years of experience within a market, know the shortcomings of those existing systems, and essentially build a new product. But the benefit is it's not from scratch, so you don't have that 2-3 year development cycle to actually just get something out in the market. And you're going to know if it works or not sooner than if you had to make all the investment to sort of develop it yourselves.
Exactly. I think that's an eloquent way of describing it. And I think that's exactly what we were able to do. What was also good for us in this experience with OQLIS is the fact that we are able to continue to focus on that which we do well, right? That's the vertical in which we operate, which is device management, right? But then also build in functionality in the reporting platform. So, and the fact that we are able to create our own version of that, if you like, which speaks to our customers, like we've done, our own set of insights, if you like, that's very valuable. I also think at the end of the day, if we continue along this path, like we have been, we find that it's less about the MDM platform and more about the output of the data stream or the interpreted output of the data stream in the reporting. Customers want to interact with that. They don't necessarily want to interact with the MDM interface anymore because it's not nearly as intuitive or as informative. And I think that's what we are excited about continuing what we're doing now. And that's what we're doing right, I believe.
Yeah, I think you've, as a business, had phenomenal success in the market in terms of doing significant projects from, say, a government point of view and sort of a big customer's point of view. So I think, I don't know how much sort of notoriety you give yourselves in terms of the great project you've done, but, is there anything that you sort of particularly proud of in the past where, everything's just lined up from a customer point of view, the systems have worked the way that they want to, the customer's been exceptionally
that never happens,
happy?
Andrew.
Okay.
You should know, you should know that. But we are very fortunate and we're very thankful that we were able to do a lot of these big projects where we were able to or required to enroll hundreds of thousands of devices, Android devices, and manage them over a 2-year period. We were asked in conjunction with other partners to do the first digital census in South Africa. And that was quite a landmark project for us and continue to be a landmark project for us. So we gained an enormous amount of knowledge, insight, and experience there purely because of the visibility that was on the project and the scale of it, and the thing which is interesting is the time scale in which we had to execute the project. Many customers have many more devices in the field than 165 or 170, but to stage all of them in the shortest possible time and deploy them and manage them that accurately, it was a challenge. But we, as I say, we've learned a lot, and we were thankfully able to execute that very effectively.
And I think if you look at the success of that and, the fact that everybody is going digital, there's no doubt that governments, institutions across the globe are going to do more digitally, more on devices, and sort of less on paper and all those things. So going forward, managing your device is going to be increasingly important. And, particularly if the government has actually bought those devices,
Exactly.
And it's not actually the owner that's actually operating them, you need to view that. So from a global point of view is that I don't see how you do a digital census and then do not do a digital census next. You have to. You've set the standard. Exactly.
You're right. That also reminds me of one other thing, and that is, of course, managing the entire life cycle of the device is important. And the actual staging of the device plays an enormously important role because that determines how you kick off, right? So one of the things which you might find interesting is we are also the exclusive partner for Google Zero Touch in Africa. That means that we can stage a device without taking it out the box, right? Without touching it. That's what Zero Touch means. Wow. So we're able to allow our customers now to deploy as many devices as they want, sealed in the box, by preparing that device or notifying the device what it needs to do when switched on via the operating system, which is Android and Google. That device is able to be switched on by the user. It automatically follows a specific switch on path. It automatically is seen as a company-owned device or an enterprise-owned device. It automatically enrolls with the correct MDM, enrolls it in the right folder, downloads all the applications, locks it down, starts tracking and do everything that it is supposed to do purely by switching the device on.
Wow.
And that is really a game changer. It's a phenomenal service by Google, and we are really fortunate to be able to be their partner in that, and it's increasingly more prevalent amongst our customers.
Because if you think about the logistics of 180,000 devices,
it's a nightmare.
I mean, how do you take inventory of all of it, get it in the same place, make sure everything's on it, enroll it, and then distribute it?
And the time and the risk. There are so many elements whereby if you distribute a a sealed device is switched on. And the other thing which is obviously important, and why I mentioned that is the Insights platform is so important even during that staging phase, because we can track the speed at which things are switched on, enrolled, etc., etc. And the customer can have a live view of that, right? Which again speaks to what I said earlier. But the other thing which is interesting about this is if a device happens to be stolen, and if it is possible for the thief to factory reset the device, all that will happen with that device is it will automatically boot up again, re-enroll itself, lock it down, and it'll go into that loop. So it can't be used for anything other than what it was intended to do. And it comes from the operating system side.
Wow.
So really handy feature for service.
And if you think about how telecoms companies sort of play a role, or device manufacturers sort of play a role in this life cycle, you'd think that the telecom companies would be almost have their own MDM or be the agents for these MDMs, because they're the ones sort of flogging these devices and things like that. What is it, just sort of an historic gap, or do you think that the telecoms it's not their game, they're not quite equipped to service that area, because it's part of the device's life cycle where it exists? Obviously they're in charge of the SIM card and the data and maybe selling the device, but the MDM seems such a logical piece of that.
It's a complex question with an easy answer. The easy answer is simply that the network operators are predominantly into retail. They sell devices to the end user. Their revenue predominantly comes from selling a device to an end user, sell him a SIM card, selling him a data bundle, and so forth, or a subscription, right? That is changing because of a variety of reasons, but that is predominantly their core business. So when they do, get a request for business-orientated services, they tend to not be, and I say this cautiously, but they tend to not be geared for that. So they do partner with people like ourselves who are experts in the field to render that service in conjunction with them. They are geared for many things, but they're not, as you say, not necessarily experts in the MDM space. That might change into the future, but for the moment, that would be my honest assessment of the situation.
Yeah, it's kind of like, do you focus on your core business or sort of pursue these auxiliary services? But yeah, I suppose it depends how well the customer also understands what they're getting, because they might know they need a device, but the first thing that springs to mind is not like, oh, where's my platform to manage this device? It's not like the natural conclusion, but it actually is the real conclusion when you need to manage it at scale.
The tool, of the business tool, if you like, that the networks offer their customers very successfully is an APN service, right? An access point network.
Okay.
That's where they give a managed data service to the client. They give them a SIM card which connects via a specific APN setting.
Okay.
And there is preferential data and preferential data prices available to the customer there.
Okay.
Also a variety of other services. It's a full managed service, so they can open certain ports, block certain traffic, etc. on that network, on that APN network for the customer without influencing their broader retail network.
Okay.
So that is a very valuable service, and that's obviously something that would be, I think, at the heart of the business service that the networks offer. That entire solution is complemented by an MDM, right? Because the MDM during the staging phase is able to push that customer-specific APN settings to the device, because otherwise the device wouldn't work. So the user literally has to pop in a SIM card and off it goes. And a range of other things. And it's not to say that the network isn't capable of managing an MDM. I just think that they are more geared to managing data services, data SIMs, APN SIMs, and the likes. And at this particular point in any event, I think it's easier and more lucrative for them to source it out to someone.
And also, they're not necessarily concerned with how the device will be used. I mean, if the device is sold, it's sold. So, but yet the customer, he's got an idea of, I want to issue all my sales guys this device, and that's where more of a consultative approach makes sense, because the network operator is not concerned how it will be used, but the customer still needs to solve a problem. And that's how they will use the device, and how they will use it needs some sort of platform to manage and some sort of rules that govern it, some way to collect the data, some way to manage all of that.
Yeah, it's like I said earlier, I think in this day and age, you cannot put a device in a user's hands without it being properly managed. It's then you give him, then you have a liability. You don't have an asset, because things will go wrong. The device will be non-compliant. It will be abused. It will be lost if it can't be tracked and recovered. So, so that's definitely it. From where it was a luxury maybe 8-10 years ago, it is now a necessity. And in the same way, as we've said before, that device, when managed, generate that very rich data stream. And if the data is not put in the hands of the right person who needs to receive that, it's also, lost and a loss. So that, I think, is why the interpretation of the data, which is generated by any data stream, be that via an MDM or any other system, is the future. It will remain important, and it will become increasingly more important as long as the data is put in the hands of the person who needs to understand and or use that information, and it is done so in a method which is effective and accurate.
And so thinking about the future of managing a device, or sort of MDMs and things, like what do you see in the next sort of 5 to 10 years, say in particular this world of AI, or the customer's increasing desire for sort of out the box insights, so how do you see the next sort of 5 to 10 years playing out in the device space?
I think we are going to see a big change. I think we're going to see a specific catalyst that's going to cause specific devices to become much more prevalent than the ones we are currently using. I think the rugged device in particular is going to be the winner of them all.
Sure.
A rugged device where it was very expensive in the past is now very affordable as a normal device. But its durability, its elegance, and the length of its life is just so much better that will become the device of choice, certainly in the business environment. As far as MDMs are concerned, the reliance on functionality and services offered by Google in the Android space specific, and to a certain extent iOS, does determine the tempo at which MDMs are able to do device management, right? Okay. Because it needs
operating system.
Exactly. That being said, Google is very active and proactive in catering for the needs of the MDMs in the field. I think there'll also be a clear division between customers wanting high-end management functionality and other customers require basic device management functionality. Okay. So I think MDMs will need to cater for a modular approach in the very near future, where customers say, I don't need a Rolls-Royce. I need a Polo, Volkswagen Polo. It's effective and it does these 3 things for me really well, and that's all I need. I need to push applications, I need to lock it down, and I need to track it. I don't need other fancy stuff in my world, where there are other customers who say, I need the detailed stuff. The important thing is whether the data stream is big or small, the data still needs to be interpreted by the correct person. And that's why the insights that a platform that plugs into that MDN, whichever it is, will remain important. And that's why we've made a strategic decision to partner with you guys, because we believe that will be the mainstay moving forward.
And I think everybody around the globe essentially has the same problems around managing
Correct.
devices. So, us in the southern tip of Africa, we've got our own unique problems, but I think from an international offering point of view, there's a lot to be said about, different countries sort of using that sort of platform, that product, that data as a product, that AI insights within their customer base to manage what they're doing and not necessarily worry about piecing that together themselves.
It's definitely an exportable item. There's no question about that. I just want to add something to what I said earlier, and that is, when you talk about a technology platform like an MDM, there is a specific approach that is taken by the designer and the developer of that platform, right? It focuses on specific IT issues, device management issues, et cetera, and the emphasis of their service isn't necessarily focused on that on the interpretation of the data stream. That's where the clear chasm, I think, is, and that's why we are filling that void by putting an intelligent, artificially intelligent, capable, reactive, responsive, and a platform in place which can interpret and translate the information, and also act on certain things and kick off certain response processes, which isn't catered for in the M environment. Do you know what I'm saying?
I know exactly what you're saying. And I think, people also underestimate that aspect of data, is that you can view it, but you also want to do something about it.
Correct.
So you might want to trigger alerts, or send emails, send daily reports. But, to rely on somebody to log into somewhere else and then to derive insights, you might, to build external interfaces, whether it's sending people messages about something going wrong or triggering something in the MDM based on a business rule that you've done on top of the data.
But more importantly than that, I think the approach to the actions that you've just mentioned is different if it comes from an artificial intelligence reporting platform perspective versus a technology-based MDM perspective. Different people have got different approaches to things and therefore can act or can action things in a different way, right? And I believe that the reporting or the insights approach speaks more to normal people than the MDM.
Yeah.
The MDM speaks more to IT people. I mentioned something similar earlier, and that's why we are so attracted to that, and that's why we felt it's imperative for us to future-proof our business by having that component so closely associated with the MDM data stream.
Yeah.
In many cases, we speak to our customers and show them our insights platform. We don't even show the MDM. Why? Because the result speaks more clearly to the user audience that we're speaking to than the MDM would, right?
Yeah, and the decision maker at the end of the day needs to understand the value they're getting and needs to be translated to them in a way that they understand.
Exactly.
So if you're not speaking to the right people that have the mandate for those sort of decisions, so you're reliant on that other person to sort of sell up the chain, and it might get a bit of broken telephone. Yeah.
No, we're singing off the same hymn sheet, that's for sure.
Yeah, and I think, data, I've mentioned this a couple of times, our sort of vision of data, like I've coined this phrase, like data is the new ERP, so you can think about data being the core system of every business. And it's, whether you're using an accounting system or an MDM or a Salesforce system, at the end of the day, you're generating data.
Yeah.
And the system you have is the data itself. And, how you combine those attributes together, how you derive insights from that. In our vision, that's actually the next step for businesses. And you can see businesses adopting sort of data literacy initiatives, data first approaches. So you can definitely see that that's where businesses are focusing on. They understand that. But once again, they're reliant on people within their organization to pass that information, to understand it, to build the rules around that, and it might be that the device doesn't exist in a silo. You might want to pull in data from routers, or that the device is connected in a Wi-Fi network, or pull information from a boom gate system or something, and sort of correlate device data with other system data to then provide further insight.
Well, you took the words out of my mouth, and I think that is so prevalent. IoT, the Internet of Things right now, is showing a massive growth curve. The automation of information coming from other devices than just smart devices is imperative, and it'll continue to become important as we move forward. What I'd like to say is that what we find with our clients is, even though we might introduce the Insights platform to purely present translated data based on the MDM data stream, they very soon, after being familiar with that interface, start asking us about, but hang on a second, can't you also include this data? And can't you interface with that system? Because now they prefer that interface above every other interface, because it's so intuitive, because it's so easy, and because it's interactive with the system that it gets the data from, right? So I think standardizing on a specific interface, which is so intuitive, is the next step. We are obviously only too happy to accommodate them, to include all systems that has got an API, and help them to even include systems that doesn't have an API. And again, combine that data. And that's super powerful. The information that you'll be able to gain, and the insight that you'll be able to gain by the combination of data from different systems and different data streams is amazing.
You also mentioned that there's also no one size fits all. And I think you've also been proactive sort of within the market to say, well, maybe I need to look at different sources. Maybe that's an alternative MDM, and maybe
Correct.
A particular MDM gives me all the features I want that matches this price point, this offering that the customer needs. So I think one of the benefits, that you guys have in the market is that you're getting the needs from the customer. And in a lot of ways, obviously you've got sort of partnerships with vendors, but you can also provide the customer with the best alternative that suits them at the budget that suits them, and start being sort of vendor agnostic in a way. But ultimately,
Absolutely.
You want to solve the customer's problem in the most effective way possible.
Yeah, we don't find ourselves selling anything anymore, really. We are presented with a problem, and it sounds arrogant, but it's just the way that it happens, right? We are presented with a problem, and we give a solution to that problem. And these are the components to it. And either that fits the budget or it doesn't, or we scale it a little bit and off we go, right? The availability of product these days make it easy to get lost in some universe where you're unable to choose, right? However, if you've got some component that can connect to any product which the customer might either be using already or which he chooses to use, that solves a lot of problems.
So, I mean, if you had to sketch sort of the perfect outcome for sort of what we're doing together, and, what basically we want to present to the customers, what does that sort of ideal vision look like for you?
Well, I think it contains a few elements of which we've discussed today, and others which we haven't. But I think for me, the ideal situation will be where the system that generates the data stream becomes completely transparent. Number one. Number two, that as many, if not all, data streams are incorporated into one interface and allows the user of that to have access to the information which benefits him or which assists him to do his job, right? That single interface will be invaluable. And then we get away from products, from OEMs, then it's about the service or the services and the solution, which is required by the user. Through a rich graphic user interface and utilizing all the fancy technologies like voice interaction and all of those things which is available. And that's the future which we are all reaching for, right? To make it as easy as possible for someone to do their job or to execute a plan or a specific job of work.
So Theunis, we've spoken a lot about the sort of the theoretical elements of what we're doing and some of the practical elements. And I think a lot of the discussion has been sort of around the conceptual things, although, we've obviously done things together practically. But I think, the logical question is, if I put myself in the shoes of the listener right now, and sort of I'm interested in some of the discussions that we had today, how does a customer sort of find out more about what we're doing together? How do they get in touch? Like, what is the best way? And what would you want anybody's action to be sort of watching this podcast today?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. Seeing is believing. And I believe that if a potential customer can experience this singular interface that really gives him information about all the systems in his organization, they should reach out, and they can do that via going to our website, www.multitel.co.za. There is a contact form. There's information that they can get more about what we've spoken about today. And our phone number is there, or they can fill in a form and tell us exactly what they're interested in. We're more than happy to connect with them, do a proof of concept, show them in their terms what this can do for them. And I think that will be very helpful to anybody who's interested.
Yeah, and I think that's, one of the most important things in this day and age is sort of the proofs in the pudding.
Exactly.
And, a lot of technology companies talk a lot of things, but sort of the rubber meets the road to actually sort of produce something of value and see something of value. So I think anybody that's interested, I'd encourage them to sort of reach out and to learn a little bit more, because it is potentially a complicated area to dive into. Where do I go to for devices? Do I need an MDM before I need a device? What are the best devices? They might need some expert guidance in that.
We are really well geared, and we've done this many times before, so we can lead them through that process, get them up and running really quickly, and give them the benefit of all the experience which we've gained over the last 20 years.
So Theunis, I want to thank you once again for being here. And I've thoroughly enjoyed this conversation and even sort of learned a little bit more myself, and I appreciate that very much. So you've been listening to the Insights Overflow podcast. This has been episode 4, and thank you very much.